The news broke like wildfire across Ouagadougou. A French intelligence operative had been caught on Burkina soil. Rumors spread faster than the government could issue statements. Whispers of espionage, sabotage, and secret deals filled the streets. To ordinary citizens, it felt like confirmation of what many had long suspected, that foreign hands were still meddling in Burkina Faso's fragile march toward sovereignty. The story began on a quiet evening, not far from one of the military checkpoints set up after a string of terrorist attacks. A man, carrying what seemed to be ordinary equipment, was stopped for routine inspection. But what followed was anything but routine. Inside his bag, security forces discovered encrypted communication devices, surveillance notes, and photographs of military installations. Documents marked in French stirred immediate suspicion. Within hours, the man's identity was revealed. He was not a diplomat, not a journalist, not an aid worker, but an operative with ties to French intelligence. The arrest sent shockwaves through the Burkina capital. The streets buzzed with one question: what was France still doing here? A country on edge, Burkina Faso is no stranger to foreign involvement. For decades, it had been under the shadow of Paris, first as a colony, later as part of France's so-called Françafrique network. Military bases, mining contracts, and intelligence missions had long made the small West African nation a pawn in larger geopolitical games. But all of that was supposed to be changing. Since rising to power in 2022, Captain Ibrahim Traoré had promised to break Burkina Faso free from foreign control. French troops had been expelled, their bases closed, their flags lowered. Traoré's speeches carried the fire of defiance. Burkina Faso belongs to Burkina. No foreign power will dictate our destiny. So, when news broke that a French spy had been operating right under the government's nose, it was more than just a scandal. It was a challenge to Traoré's authority, a direct attack on his promise of sovereignty. The spy's mission officials close to the investigation began leaking details to the press. The French operative, they claimed, had been mapping Burkina troop movements, intercepting communications, and even attempting to recruit informants inside the military. More alarming were the files that hinted at coordination with local networks, potential sabotage cells meant to destabilize the government. One document reportedly referenced plans to monitor leadership vulnerabilities, a phrase that analysts interpreted as coded language for regime change strategies. To Traoré's supporters, this was nothing short of proof that Paris had never left. Even after soldiers and diplomats had been ordered out, France's influence lingered in the shadows. The public reaction. The arrest triggered an explosion of anger and pride on the streets. Crowds gathered outside the French Cultural Center, waving Burkina flags and chanting slogans against neocolonialism. Social media lit up with hashtags like "Chiku hands off Burkina" and "Yun Traoré's Paris." For many citizens, this was more than an isolated espionage incident. It was a symbol of decades of interference. Ordinary Burkina pointed to their gold mines, their cotton fields, their uranium deposits, and asked, who really benefits from our resources? The French spy became a face for an old wound. People remembered how Thomas Sankara, the revolutionary leader of the 1980s, had warned about the dangers of foreign manipulation. Now, almost 4 decades later, those warnings seem to echo louder than ever. The government's stance captain Traoré moved quickly to seize the narrative. In a televised statement, he confirmed the arrest without naming France directly. His words were sharp but measured. Burkina Faso will never again be a playground for foreign operatives. Those who think they can undermine our sovereignty will be exposed and dealt with accordingly. Behind the scenes, however, officials made no secret of who they believed was responsible. France, they argued, had too much at stake in Burkina Faso's shift toward independence. The expulsion of French troops had been a humiliation for Paris, And now, the discovery of espionage seemed like a desperate attempt to claw back influence. The Paris denial, the French government, as expected, denied everything. "Baseless accusations," said one official in Paris. French media framed the incident as propaganda, accusing Traoré's government of manufacturing scandals to distract from domestic challenges. But the denials did little to calm suspicions. In Burkina Faso, to many, France's words sounded hollow, especially in a country where memories of colonial exploitation were still fresh. A dangerous game espionage is never just about one arrest. It is about the shadows behind the story, the hidden power struggles shaping nations. Burkina Faso sits at the crossroads of the Sahel, a region rich in resources yet torn apart by jihadist insurgencies. Whoever controls this land controls not only gold and minerals but also the strategic routes that stretch across West Africa. France had long considered the Sahel its backyard, but Traoré's rise had changed the rules. Now, other powers, Russia, China, Turkey, were stepping in, offering partnerships without the colonial baggage. The French spy incident seemed to confirm that Paris was unwilling to let go quietly. The bigger picture analysts quickly connected the dots. The arrest wasn't just about one spy, it was about the future of Burkina Faso and perhaps the future of Africa itself. Was this proof that France was still orchestrating influence in its former colonies? Was Traoré's government strong enough to resist? And if Burkina Faso could successfully stand up to espionage, would it inspire other African nations to do the same? One headline captured the mood. The battle for Burkina Faso is the battle for Africa. The unanswered questions. For now, the French operative remains in custody, but his arrest raises more questions than answers. How many others like him are still operating undetected? Was this part of a larger network targeting the Sahel? And how will Traoré use this moment as a symbol of strength or as justification for deeper crackdowns on opposition? What's clear is that the game has changed. What looked like a small checkpoint arrest has exploded into a full-blown geopolitical showdown, and this is only the beginning. The arrest of a French spy in Ouagadougou was shocking, but to many Burkinabés it wasn't surprising. For them, it was simply the latest chapter in a long history of French interference that has stretched from the colonial era to the modern day. To understand why this single arrest has caused such an uproar, we need to trace the roots of the problem, back to when Burkina Faso wasn't even called Burkina Faso. From Upper Volta to Burkina Faso. For decades, Burkina Faso was known as Upper Volta, a small colony within France's vast West African empire. Its landlocked geography made it strategically less important than coastal colonies, but its people were seen as a resource. Young men were sent to fight in France's wars, cotton was exported to feed European industries, and gold began to be extracted under French oversight. Independence came in 1960, but like in so many former colonies, independence was only partial. France maintained control through what later became known as Françafrique, a network of political deals, military pacts, and economic ties designed to keep African nations dependent on Paris. Burkina Faso's leaders were often caught in the trap: follow France's line and receive aid, or resist and risk destabilization. Sankara's defiance then came Thomas Sankara, the man still revered today as Africa's Che Guevara. In 1983, he seized power and changed not just the name of the country, but its direction. He renamed Upper Volta to Burkina Faso, land of upright people. He rejected foreign aid that came with strings attached. He nationalized resources, promoted local production, and challenged the West with fiery speeches. One of his most famous lines still echoes across Africa. "He who feeds you controls you." Sankara's defiance made him popular among ordinary Africans but dangerous to global powers. He warned that Africa's debt was a new form of slavery, that foreign troops on African soil were guardians of exploitation. But his bold vision was cut short. In 1987, Sankara was assassinated in a coup widely believed to have been backed, or at least tolerated, by France. His friend-turned-rival Blaise Compaoré took over, and for the next 27 years, Burkina Faso slid back into the web of Françafrique. Decades of dependence under Compaoré, French influence flourished. French companies secured mining contracts. French troops used Burkina Faso as a base for operations in the Sahel. French advisors shaped policies. And while Paris spoke the language of partnership, the reality was control. During this period, Burkina Faso's natural wealth, gold, cotton, and other minerals, flowed out of the country, while poverty and instability remained within. For many citizens, the sense grew that independence was an illusion. Traoré steps in fast, forward to 2022. Amidst rising jihadist violence, widespread anger at corruption, and deep frustration with French policies, a young army captain named Ibrahim, Traoré rose to power. His promise was clear. Burkina Faso would no longer be a puppet. He expelled French troops, rejected dependency, and began speaking openly about sovereignty in a way that evoked memories of Sankara. So when Traoré stood before the cameras after the spy's arrest, many saw him not just as a soldier, but as Sankara's heir, a man willing to confront Paris no matter the cost. Why espionage? The big question, however, remains. Why would France risk a spy operation? Analysts suggest several reasons. Military intelligence. With French troops expelled, Paris lost access to on-the-ground intelligence. A spy network could replace those eyes and ears. Political sabotage. A destabilized Burkina Faso could be used as an example to other African nations, a warning that rejecting France leads to chaos. Resource protection. Burkina Faso's gold reserves are among the richest in the Sahel. French companies, having lost influence, may have relied on intelligence operatives to monitor competitors, particularly Russian firms moving in. Regional strategy. Burkina Faso is part of the alliance of Sahel states with Mali and Niger, both of which also expelled French troops. Weakening Traoré could weaken the entire bloc. In this context, the spy's arrest looks less like an isolated event and more like a move in a high-stakes geopolitical chess game. The people's memory for the Burkinabe people. None of this is abstract. They remember French helicopters flying over villages. They remember reports of resources extracted and exported. They remember the decades under Compaoré where dissent was silenced and Paris pulled the strings. Now, with Traoré exposing, espionage, the past and present collide. Ordinary citizens see the arrest as proof that France's shadow still lingers, and that their leader is right to push back. Paris versus Ouagadougou. Meanwhile, the relationship between Paris and Ouagadougou has plunged to new lows. French diplomats have been recalled. Trade deals are frozen. The media war is escalating. French outlets accuse Traoré of authoritarianism, while Burkinabe media accuse France of neocolonial sabotage. It is no longer a hidden rivalry. It is a very public power game. Echoes across Africa. And here's where the story becomes bigger than Burkina Faso. Across the continent, from Mali to Niger, from Senegal to Chad, young people are rising with the same demands. Sovereignty, dignity, independence. Traoré's boldness is inspiring, but it also threatens the status quo. France, once the undisputed power in West Africa, now finds itself cornered. Every expulsion, every protest, every spy arrest chips away at its influence. The French spy in Burkina Faso, therefore, is not just a man with a bag of devices. He is a symbol of the struggle between old colonial systems and new African leadership. A question of destiny. As Part 2 of this story closes, one question dominates the air in Ouagadougou and beyond. If France could assassinate Sankara in the 1980s, could they undermine Traoré today? The arrest may have foiled one mission, but the battle for Burkina Faso's sovereignty is far from over. And in this new game, the stakes are higher, the enemies are sharper, and the players are no longer hiding. When the news broke that a French spy had been caught in Burkina Faso, the shockwaves didn't stop at the borders of Ouagadougou. They rippled across Africa, across Europe, and into the halls of global power. Because this wasn't just about espionage, it was about influence, resources, and the future direction of an entire continent. For some, this arrest was proof that Africa is breaking free. For others, it was a sign of dangerous instability. But everyone agreed. The balance of power in the Sahel has changed. The alliance of Sahel states. A new bloc emerges. Let's start with Burkina Faso's immediate neighbors, Mali and Niger. Both countries had already expelled French forces, both had faced coups led by young military officers, and both had turned their eyes toward new partners outside the West. Together with Burkina Faso, they formed the Alliance of Sahel States, AES, in 2023. This new alliance pledged mutual defense, resource sharing, and a rejection of foreign domination. Many saw it as a mini-NATO for the Sahel, but without Western strings attached. Now, with the spy scandal breaking in Ouagadougou, the alliance feels even more justified. Leaders in Bamako and Niamey openly declared solidarity with Traoré, warning that espionage and sabotage are part of France's ongoing strategy to destabilize their governments. In short, the spy incident didn't isolate Burkina Faso. It strengthened regional unity against Paris. Enter Russia, the shadow partner. But if the French are out, who's in? The answer is clear. Russia. Across the Sahel, Moscow has positioned itself as the alternative partner for nations tired of Western paternalism. After Mali expelled French troops, Russian advisors and Wagner mercenaries arrived. They provided training, weapons, and sometimes direct battlefield support against insurgents. In Burkina Faso, the Russian footprint is growing. State TV broadcasts speeches of Vladimir Putin with subtitles. Pro-Traoré rallies feature not just Burkinabe flags, but Russian ones too, and deals are being struck. Gold for weapons, diplomatic cover in the UN for political loyalty in the Sahel. The French spy scandal gives Russia a propaganda gift, evidence that the West is meddling, while Moscow offers respectful partnership. But here's the catch. For critics, Russia isn't a savior, just a new master. The danger is clear. Will Burkina Faso trade one dependency for another? Western panic in Paris. The mood is furious. French officials denied involvement, but their frustration was palpable. Losing influence in Mali was painful. Losing Niger, with its uranium mines critical for France's nuclear energy, was a strategic blow. And now Burkina Faso, once a loyal ally, is slipping completely out of their grasp. In Washington, too, alarm bells are ringing. The U.S. Pentagon fears that the Sahel is becoming a staging ground for Russian and even Chinese influence. A new Cold War in Africa. That phrase is popping up in think tank reports and intelligence briefings. The spy incident only adds fuel. If France is spying, it's because they feel desperate. If they feel desperate, it's because they're losing. And if they're losing, then Africa's geopolitical map is being redrawn. The media war. Meanwhile, another battlefield has opened. The media French newspapers framed the arrest as political theater, suggesting Traoré exaggerated the incident to rally nationalist support. Burkinabe media, in contrast, portrayed it as hard evidence of neocolonial sabotage. On social media, hashtags like Chichiun hands off Burkina and Traoré the defender trend across West Africa. Videos of cheering crowds in Ouagadougou circulate widely, showing ordinary citizens celebrating the exposure of France's dirty tricks. This information war matters, because for the first time in decades, the West is losing not just control on the ground, but the narrative. And in politics, controlling the story is half the battle. Proxy wars on the horizon. But let's be clear, this isn't just a media battle. Real dangers loom. Insurgency groups, jihadist fighters tied to ISIS and Al-Qaeda are still active across Burkina Faso's north and east. With the UN gone and France expelled, they might sense an opportunity. Foreign sabotage. If espionage is confirmed, it won't stop with one spy. Networks could still be operating, seeking to destabilize Traoré's government. Great power rivalries. As Russia steps in, Western powers may respond through sanctions, covert operations, or attempts to back rival factions. This is how proxy wars begin. Local struggles become arenas for global competition. And right now, Burkina Faso sits at the center of the storm. Traoré's gamble. Where does this leave Captain Ibrahim Traoré? For his supporters, he is Africa's new hope, a leader young enough to think boldly, courageous enough to defy Paris, and visionary enough to revive Sankara's spirit. But for his critics, he is walking on a knife's edge. His army is under-equipped. His country is surrounded by violence. His alliances with Russia could backfire. And if France and the West decide he's too dangerous, they may not hesitate to undermine him, just as they did with Sankara in 1987. The spy scandal proves one thing: the game is deadly serious. Traoré is not just leading Burkina Faso anymore. He is symbolizing a continental rebellion, and symbols are powerful, but they are also dangerous targets. Africa watching. Across Africa, the response is clear. In Mali, crowds cheered the news of the arrest. In Niger, activists compared Traoré to Sankara. In Senegal and Ivory Coast, still heavily tied to France, young protesters held banners reading, "We want our Traoré too." The French spy isn't just a captured agent. He is a spark. And that spark may ignite a fire far bigger than Paris ever imagined. A dangerous question. As we close Part 3, one dangerous question hangs in the air. If France lost its grip on Mali, Niger, and now Burkina Faso, how far will it go to claw back influence? Because one thing is certain: espionage is only the beginning. The arrest of a French spy in Burkina Faso was not just a headline. It was a warning shot. It signaled that the battle between Ouagadougou and Paris had moved into a new and dangerous phase. But as the dust settles, one question dominates. Every conversation in the Sahel, in Africa, and across the world: can Captain Ibrahim Traoré survive this power game? Or will he be crushed like so many African leaders before him? A dangerous history. To answer this, we must first look backward. Burkina Faso has seen this script before. In the 1980s, Thomas Sankara, the African Che Guevara, dared to stand up to France, the IMF, and global elites. He nationalized land, pushed self-sufficiency, and denounced neocolonialism. But in 1987, Sankara was assassinated in a coup widely believed to have had French fingerprints all over it. For many Burkinabe, history feels like it's repeating. Traoré walks in Sankara's shadow, young, defiant, uncompromising. And just like Sankara, he now faces threats from within and without. The spy scandal has made one thing undeniable. Foreign powers are watching, plotting, and interfering. Internal pressures, but Traoré's greatest challenge may not come from Paris, Moscow, or Washington. It may come from inside Burkina Faso. The country is still under siege. Militants roam the countryside. More than 2 million Burkinabe have been displaced. Entire provinces are struggling to stay under government control. Traoré has inspired. Hope, yes, but hope alone won't feed families, secure villages, or rebuild schools. If progress is too slow, frustration could boil over. Not from elites, but from ordinary citizens who want results, not just rhetoric. Moreover, not everyone in Burkina Faso's military is loyal. Some officers still have ties to the old French networks. Others are skeptical of Traoré's tilt toward Russia. A divided army can be just as dangerous as a foreign spy. The Russian question. Speaking of Russia, here lies another risk. On one hand, Moscow provides what Paris refused: weapons, trainers, and political backing. In speeches, Traoré praises new partners who respect us, and the Russian presence grows more visible each month. But critics warn, dependency on Moscow could simply replace one master with another. Wagner's record in Mali and the Central African Republic is controversial. Yes, they fight rebels, but they've also been accused of looting resources and committing abuses. For Burkina Faso, the risk is clear. Will the dream of sovereignty end in a new cycle of foreign control? France's next move, and then, of course, there is Paris. The arrest of a French spy is not a small embarrassment. It's a strategic humiliation. And history tells us something. France rarely lets go easily. Already, rumors circulate of covert operations. Some say French intelligence is reaching out to opposition figures inside Burkina Faso. Others suggest sabotage campaigns may target infrastructure or discredit the government. And analysts whisper, could there be another coup in the making? After all, Paris has long used its invisible hand to protect its interests in Africa. And Burkina Faso, sitting on gold and strategically located in the Sahel, is too important to ignore. The global stakes, but this is not just about one small West African country. This is about the future of global power. For the West, Burkina Faso represents a dangerous precedent. If one country after another expels French troops, UN missions, and Western influence, the entire neocolonial system could unravel. For Russia and China, it's an opportunity. The Sahel is rich in resources: gold, uranium, oil, and poor in trust toward the West. Moscow and Beijing see a chance to cement influence where Europe is losing ground. For Africa, it's a test case. If Traoré succeeds, he proves that sovereignty is not just a slogan, it's possible. If he fails, critics will say independence is a fantasy. That's why the arrest of a single spy in Ouagadougou has triggered debates from Dakar to Washington, from Paris to Moscow. Traoré's path forward. So what must Traoré do to survive? Deliver security. He must show real progress against militants. Even small victories, retaken villages, secured roads, will boost confidence. Without security, his promises ring hollow. Unite the army. A divided military is a ticking bomb. Traoré must weed out disloyal officers, strengthen morale, and ensure his soldiers fight for the nation, not for hidden foreign masters. Balance partnerships. Yes, Russia offers support, but leaning too heavily on Moscow risks dependency. Traoré's real power lies in diversifying alliances. Africa first, but open to whoever respects sovereignty. Win the narrative. In today's world, battles are fought not just with guns, but with information. Traoré's speeches already inspire youth across Africa. He must continue to control the narrative, positioning himself as the face of a new Pan-African awakening. The symbol and the man. At the end of the day, this is bigger than politics. Traoré has become a symbol. For millions of Africans, he represents the unfinished dream of Sankara, the dream of an Africa free from foreign puppeteers. But symbols are dangerous. They inspire crowds, yes, but they also attract enemies. Sankara was cut down at 37. Lumumba was assassinated at 35. Nkrumah was overthrown in his 40s. History is cruel to Africa's young revolutionaries. The question is, will Traoré write a new chapter, or will he become another tragic page in the old book? Final thoughts. The French spy incident was more than a scandal. It was a glimpse into the shadows of global power, a reminder that in Africa, sovereignty is not given. It is taken and defended at great cost. Traoré has taken the boldest step yet in Burkina Faso's modern history. He has declared war not just on insurgents, but on the invisible hands of foreign control. Now, the world watches. If he succeeds, he will go down as a hero, the man who revived Sankara's spirit and inspired a continental revolution. If he fails, his name may be added to the long list of African martyrs who dared too much, too soon. But one thing is already certain. The power game between Traoré and Paris has begun, and nothing will ever be the same again. The only question left is who will win.